Ready? Rich Cowley, welcome to the Process Podcast, my friend.
Thank you very much for having me. Much appreciated.
How are you doing?
Doing well. Yeah, busy. You know, we're building this year. We've got a huge year for Hyrox and APAC. And 1 month today, we'll basically be in South Korea with our first ever race in South Korea. So preparing for that and getting going. And, you know, super excited to kind of take a new sport to, you know, to the north part of Asia, basically. We've never been there before. So, yeah, very excited for that. It's going to be good.
I think a very good opportunity for you to introduce yourself and what you do. So take it away.
Yeah, so sure. Basically, I'm Richard Cowley. So I am the APAC, so Asian Australasia Event Director, essentially. So our headquarters for Hyrox essentially sits in Hong Kong, and we obviously have different staff in the various countries. And I oversee basically all of the events that we have currently right now, and obviously all the upcoming events that we're doing across Asia. So I handle basically the day-to-day operations of the business, of the company. You know, anything you can imagine, from how do we recruit volunteers through to, you know, food supplies, you know, venue hiring, production, logistics, operations, sponsorship, all that kind of stuff. I oversee all of that stuff, obviously, with our team that we have here on the ground, and, you know, in another markets like Australia or Singapore where we have employees. So, yeah, it's kind of it's been a bit of a ride, you know, like the last, I think, year and a half. You know, we kind of kicked off, I think November 2022 was the first ever race in Asia. It was like the kind of the depths of COVID. Well, kind of coming out of the depths of COVID. I think the rest of the world were out of COVID, and we were still in it. You know, I mean, I remember it was when we first launched it. I think it was in June, July. We basically first launched Hyrox, you know, with the aim of doing a November race, and it was quite a trying time, because obviously with COVID, everything was, you weren't sure what was going to happen. You know, like gyms were having to close some days and open some days, or close for a week or whatever. So there's always like the uncertainties of what was going on, and we weren't sure, you know, with the government giving them a permit for the race, with the face mask on and not with the face mask on, you know. Luckily in the end it all kind of worked out, but that was our kind of first foray into Hyrox. And you know, we did well, I think, considering I think we had about 900 athletes. We had 0 athletes from overseas, which is, you know, compared to our races now, which is very unusual. So we had nobody come from overseas because people really couldn't, or you know, they weren't, I think it wasn't a quarantine then, but people just didn't want to risk coming in. So we basically had to rely a lot on the Hong Kong athletes, essentially Hong Kong gyms. And we worked with like gyms like yourself, obviously. I think the hardest thing though, you know, when we first launched Hyrox, was actually the fact that in Asia, I think in Hong Kong at least, there was only a couple of people that heard about it. You were actually one of them, because I remember you telling me you had some guy you were training in a gym here that did a race in Germany, I think it was.
Yeah.
You told me?
Tammi. Yeah. Tammi was coaching.
Race, yeah. It was Tammi you were coaching.
No, Tammi was coaching.
Race.
The coach.
Ah.
And I had an athlete who had done it.
Yeah.
Jade Skillen.
Ah, okay.
And Tammi had actually gone over to Germany to coach her, and actually you ended up racing with her as well, didn't you?
Yeah, we ended up doing doubles.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
How'd you get on?
Really good.
Yeah?
Yeah. I was pretty happy. I don't remember our time, but I know that we were fast.
Yeah.
And I know it's something that she's mentioned that she wants to do again, which is cool and exciting.
We're still waiting for her to come over to Hong Kong, you know? It's promising, you know?
Hey.
We're waiting for that cool
Jade,
APAC record to get broken, you know?
Rich, can I ask, because I mean that's when we first met,
yeah,
you know, the very first Hyrox, and we had a pretty big showing from Coastal.
We did, yeah.
You know, we'd obviously knew a bit about it through Tammi and one of her clients doing it. Quite a few high-profile CrossFitters had done it already in Europe, and so I'd heard of the name Hyrox, didn't really know what it was, but as soon as I read what a Hyrox race was, it just totally made sense, and I knew straight away that I was gonna do it.
Yeah.
But obviously, we met then. You know, that was November 2022.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the work that has to go in to bring in Hyrox to a new country for the very, very first time in the early days of a new sport.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you were a part of this well before November 2022. So what's your story, firstly, and then how did you come to be a part of Hyrox?
Yeah, so basically, I'm myself personally, you know, I'm obviously from the UK, but I've been living in Hong Kong 15 years. I've always worked in the sports industry, mainly sports events industry. So I left the UK about 20 years ago, it was, and I felt 19 years old, and I moved to Holland 3 months, and then I fell in love with working overseas, and like, you know, I wanted to get out of the UK like many Brits do, you know. And so basically kind of snowballed from there, and I did a sports management degree at Cardiff and UEC in Cardiff, and played like first team rugby, and had a background in competitive athletics and swimming. So I always had that interest in sports and loved sports, and basically it kind of snowballed from there. I basically worked in Holland 3 months and did a year in the States and worked in France and Spain. I was like, right, I'm going to move overseas, and that's where it came from. And the story kind of goes back because I was actually working in Fiji and Tonga, doing rugby development over there for 6 months when I graduated my first job. And I actually traveled to Hong Kong, passing through, and one of my mates from uni was running a coaching company over here. And I was like, I'd love to come back one day. So that's kind of my first foray into Hong Kong. I think it's 2005 I came over here first time to see Hong Kong. And then basically I thought maybe I'll come back here one day I'd like to. And then I kind of, was working in sports around the world. I spent like 3 years working in Africa. I did like a year in Australia, New Zealand, Samoa, Shanghai, Sri Lanka. Then I kind of was working in that sports development charity kind of role I was working in. And when the credit crunch hit the world, basically, it wasn't a good time to be working in that sector, essentially, working in sports development and charity work. So I thought, right, okay, I'm going to take the plunge now. And I kind of got offered the job in Hong Kong, and I moved out in 2009, essentially moved out. And, typical story, you come stay for 2 years, you get to your job, and then next time it's 2 years, and then you end up, then it's, I'm close to my PR in 7 years. And the next thing you know, you're married with a kid. You've been there 15 years kind of things. But I've always worked in that sports event industry role, and my first role kind of roles in Hong Kong were sports events. So I've always worked primarily actually really within the running event industry. So I did organize a lot of the road running races, trail running races, adventure races within Asia. So I did a lot of races, organized a lot of races in Hong Kong, anything from like 100-kilometer, 3 to 5K road races. Organized races in Mongolia, Nepal, China, Vietnam, all kind of over basically for Hong Kong-based companies. And I'm a runner myself, so I love the concept of racing, but also organizing, because I think you can, as a racer, you can see it from both sides of the spectrum. If you're a coach and you race at Hyrox, you probably see the same thing. I presume you can understand both sides of the spectrum. So being able to do that, being able to organize, on one weekend and race the next weekend, it really kind of gave me a good insight into what was good with the running or sports events industry and what was bad, how to organize, how not to organize, looking at what other organizers do. And I think what happened was then is obviously then we were, myself personally, I was doing that for a number of years, about 5 years. I was organized 6-7 years of organizing events. And I think with running in Hong Kong particularly, or generally anywhere, there's kind of a limit, I would say, in terms of what you can do in terms of making money as a business, I would say, but also in terms of like how far you can take it. So for example, in Hong Kong right now, if you do any trail running race, for example, there's a limit of 500 participants. That's it, from the government permits, right? So you can't just rock up and do big events anymore because you don't give the period license. So it's limiting in terms of what you can do. And then we were actually, the company I was working for, we were basically doing the Spartan races. But obviously during COVID, it was not good times with the sports events industry. So, things weren't really working out very well. And we obviously had Spartan, and then we had an opportunity. We're doing something very similar to Hyrox, I would say. I won't go into details, but we're doing something very similar to that. And then basically we were looking at Hyrox for a while in terms of what it was. And, every time we were looking at events similar to what we were planning to do, Hyrox kept popping up. And it seemed to be like the leader of what it was, that leader of fitness racing. You look at the branding and advertising of the race, it's really high class. Really, really high class. I think if you go to, you've been to many races, we have 1,000 Hyrox barriers right there. Every branding is on point, sponsors, everything's in black and yellow, and it's really, really, it pops very well, And we kept looking at that and saying, this is amazing. And the story kind of goes that basically we reached out to Hyrox ourselves here in Hong Kong and said, listen, we're interested in bringing Hyrox to APAC. And, we spoke to Christian and Mo, who are basically the founders. I'll talk about them later. The founders of Hyrox, essentially. And, obviously they're looking to expand. The headquarters in Germany and the UK and Europe. So they have, the US, they have head offices there. But, of course, they don't have an office here. So we're like, well, we would like that opportunity. But obviously COVID is kind of going on at the same time. So we first started off with Hong Kong. And that's kind of where it started. We launched our first race, 900 people. I think my first experience with Hyrox was actually where I traveled to Amsterdam in October 2022, because prior to that, I could have gone somewhere, but there's quarantine in Hong Kong. It's very hard to really get over there. So that was my first experience. And when I first saw it, I was just like, it's unbelievable. I remember in Amsterdam, I was just standing up on the balcony, where the staff stand, just looking down in this, this big hall, running track, 1,000 athletes running around it. you see the wall balls going off here, you see the skier there, and the atmosphere, the DJ, the MC, and just like it was just amazing for me because you'll see during COVID as well, like the tail end, and people just packed like this with no mask on. It was just like, this is what life should be like, this is what a real event is. And it blew my mind, like how cool it was and how organized it was and how diligent it was with every single minute detail. And I thought, this is just brilliant. And then we did our first race in November in Hong Kong, which obviously you guys were part of, and Tammi did great and you did great. And it was just such a buzz. I think the market when they saw it, and I think if I would describe it, I think there was kind of people who had kind of fenced it with Hyrox, and then there was people that would jump straight in like 2 feet, like coastal gyms like yourselves, and there was those that sat on the fence. And those that sat on the fence for sure, once they saw it, they're like, oh man, I missed out. They got that FOMO. For us personally, we had 20 gyms when we first launched Hyrox in Hong Kong, coastal obviously being one of them. That week after the first week of Hyrox, we signed 10 more. So we basically grew 50% in one week because of what they saw, and I think the power of Hyrox, seeing is believing. And I think that's the thing, is once people get there and they understand, they see it, they're like, this is just amazing. I think the buzz, I did the race for the first time myself in November in Hong Kong, and I've been itching to try and do it. But when you're the event director, it's hard to do your own races. We kind of have that standard, you don't do your own race. But now we've built the team, it's our third race. I was actually able to do it, and I absolutely loved it. I know you guys did it, and I'd like to know your thoughts, but I just loved it, and I was buzzing for like a whole week afterwards. And I've done hundreds of races in Hong Kong and across Asia that I've participated